Okay, this is Steve Haynes. We're going to talk about tender or tanker nurse operations, especially in regards to the new equipment for 7008 and our standard operating guidelines. First thing we want to talk about is some cold hard facts. First off is that most of the fires that we lose control of, this is the room and contents that ends up taking out the house. It's the attic fire that ends up taking out the entire building. Is, why did we lose control of this fire? And most of the time, it's going to come down to one of two reasons. Enough flow rate was not provided fast enough. We needed 500 gallon a minute. It took us 20 minutes to generate 500 gallon a minute. By the time we got there, the fire needed 1,000. So it's simple math. The other one is that we had an interruption in the water flow. That for some reason we were flowing water, we were gaining control, and we lost our flow. And regrettably, both of these things are more likely to occur in our rural water supply operations than in a hydrant supplied operation. It's just a matter of fact, there's a lot more moving parts to our rural water supply operations. And so what we're trying to do with these new SOGs and this new equipment is to streamline this operation to try to avoid the interruptions in water flow and improve our ability to maintain higher flow rates. What we're looking at here is, we're going to talk about the old school nurse operations. The engine pulled in, realized they had a fire, dropped the line as they're coming down the driveway. The first tanker pulls up, starts pumping the line. This operation handles 90 to 95% of our fires, right? Everybody knows that with 1,500 to 3,500, 4,000 gallons of water, we're going to deal with most of our room and contents fires, most of our smaller fires. The problem arises when the fire gets larger or goes longer than we initially anticipated. So then the next tanker pulls up, and his only choice is to pump into the direct tank fills of the other tanker. Then the next truck pulls up, he's doing the same thing. And the problem is we start turning our roadway into a parking lot of tankers that are tied up into the original tanker. And there's some other problems related to this. First, it's a slow offload. These secondary tankers can only pump water into the first tanker as quickly as he's pumping into the fire ground. So that truck's going to be sitting there forever before it can ever break free to go get refilled. This first tanker is stuck here. It has become the anchor of the whole water supply operation. It'll never be able to leave the fire ground. It'll never be able to get refilled unless somebody stops to refill it. And as we discussed, that whole operation is a slow offload. The other problem in this situation too is that we're limited in flow rate to the fire ground by the tank to pump piping of that tanker. When you look at the NFPA specifications for engines and tankers, they almost always end up with a 4-inch tank to pump. And what's going to happen is up until about a third of a tank. So when you get down to about a third of a tank, you're going to be able to flow anywhere in the area about 500 to 600 GPM through that 4-inch pipe. Once you get down below a third, you're going to start seeing a rapid decrease in the amount of flow rate you can sustain to the fire ground. So this whole operation here, these traditional tanker nurse operations, we really need to try to avoid them because they're just fraught with error. They got restrictions, and they can be complicated. So what we're trying to do with the new SOGs and the new equipment is to try to simplify this and prevent some of these things from happening. Part of the new operation is right here in the picture. This is a 5-inch clappered Siamese. It's got 2 inlets. It's got a single outlet. Each inlet has a check valve or a clapper in it. So whichever one has the highest water pressure coming into it is going to go to the outlet, and the other one is going to be held closed until the first one loses pressure. From one of the things I want to point out is in the upcoming diagrams and stuff, anytime you see this symbol, this is a clappered Siamese. That's what we're talking about when you see that. On 7008, our clappered Siamese is pre-connected to 125 feet of 5-inch hose, as we talked about in some earlier videos. In addition to this 125 feet of hose, we also have 200 feet of 5-inch hose up on the cross lay. So ultimately, we have about 300 feet of hose that we can use in one of these operations if we need to. The whole key here is this Siamese, this clappered Siamese, is always kept pre-connected to the 5-inch hose. So underneath this, with this new SOG, is our first engine pulls up to the fire, realizes he has a fire in the building. The second engine lays its line in from the roadway, wraps a tree, lays the line in, gives the line to the first engine, and gives his water to the first engine. Right. The whole thing is we want continuity of water supply and maximum water flow rate. So everything focuses on that first engine. We're going to talk about some other ways of how to manage that operation in front of the fire building at a later date. So the first tanker pulls up. When 7008 pulls up, the biggest thing is you need to stay away from the scene, right? You can easily be 100 feet away from this driveway. The whole goal is to keep the tanker to where it can get free and go to be refilled. We don't want the tanker getting hemmed in. So once the tanker stops, you're going to stop either short or past the driveway. In this diagram, I'm stopping short because that just happened to be how the diagrams are set up. The driver and the officer, they're going to stretch the Siamese down to the driveway. They're going to unwrap the hose line that was laid down the driveway, connect it to the outlet of the Siamese connection. And then the pump operator, the tanker driver, is going to engage the pump, and he's going to start supplying the fire ground. This is no different than what we've been doing for hundreds of years with tankers. This is a standard nurse operation. Where the benefit comes from is when the second tanker shows up, or any other vehicle that has a water tank that can contribute water to the fire ground. So the second tanker pulls up. He's going to connect himself to the Siamese. He can pressurize his line, keeps his line at a little pressure lower than what the first tanker is supplying. As soon as that first tanker runs out of water, now the fire ground is on tanker number 2. And the part about this is now tanker number 1 is free to go get filled up. So we know what's happened here is in the traditional method of tanker nurse operations, that first tanker became the anchor for the water supply operation. In this scenario, Siamese is the anchor for our water supply. It gives us all the flexibility for swapping water sources off and on, off and on, off and on. So as the fire ground progresses, tanker number 3 shows up, and we just repeat the whole thing. Tanker number 2 keeps pumping until he's almost out of water, and then tanker number 3 takes over, and then tanker number 2 heads off to be refilled. And the whole thing is we can repeat this over and over all day long if we need to. The benefit of it, though, the big benefit comes, oops, I went the wrong direction. The big benefit comes when the folding tank or the dump site is finally ready to go online. Do we break away one of the tanker supply lines? The supply line from the dump site gets connected to the Siamese, and the dump site charges the line. And meanwhile, in this whole transition, as long as we got trucks that are showing up with some kind of water tank and a pump, we're able to keep pushing water to the fire building with a minimum chance, or at least a reduced chance, of a flow interruption. So in summary, our SOG for now on is if the tanker is to supply a 5-inch or larger supply line, the Siamese needs to be deployed between the tanker and the fire ground, or the truck receiving the other end of the 5-inch. We always want the ability to swap out something else for the tanker so that we can go get it refilled. The whole goal of this is that this should help us to increase our available flow rates on the fire ground, particularly early on. Should minimize the potential for flow interruptions and help us to smoothly transition from nurse operations to dump tank operations if we need to. The other thing is it helps us to assure that every tank of water on the fire ground can be utilized. Because once you get into a dump tank operation, you can't really get to the water that's on the pumpers or the ones that are parked. With the Siamese, this allows us to use everything that we brought with us, which could be very critical for a daytime operation. If you have any questions, please feel free to give me a call, drop me an email, or otherwise contact me at the station. Do take a chance. If you have a chance, please stop by the station. Make sure you look over this new equipment and see how you would be able to deploy it. All right, thanks a lot. Take care.